Rick, how you doing?
That shows the buildings. Oh, that's the one I want. Show it to us.
Tells me this is.
Yeah, I have this. And this, they don't have a building. So when they got to talk about
Well,
Mary has it. Oh, I see. Mary has. Oh, okay. Do you have two of them?
There's this one and this one. This is a different thing. You can hold it. You're welcome.
Yeah. Got it.
Everybody had the same idea.
Right? I just turned the front row. Oh, yeah.
You get front row seat, buddy. You get front row me too. You're such one. So who's the devil signed up to run Ward 1, you know?
So it's just like
Oh, she was, yeah, sign up or something. What did she do? Oh, yes, it's on the south end.
Honestly, it's a big ward. Really? I don't have my hammer. Get started here. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the meeting of City of Wildwood's Development and Zoning Review Committee. The purpose of this meeting is to provide this party an opportunity to informally introduce the concept of a proposed development to certain city decision makers and to allow them to ask questions and provide comments. No decisions or recommendations on the proposed development will be made by this committee. Any proposals for development you hear or see today are in the very early conceptual stages of planning without the city's departments of planning and public works having had the opportunity to review them. Accordingly, discussion of specific details of any proposed development plan at this time are premature as they are subject to change prior to the formal submission process. In light of the informal and preliminary nature of the presentation today, the public has been invited to attend and learn about concepts for the proposed developments in Wildwood. But comment will not be offered at this time. Any person interested in commenting on the proposal discussed today are encouraged to contact their elected representatives and also take advantage of the numerous opportunities to speak before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council when, if such occurs, the development is formally submitted for the city's consideration. Mr. Lynch.
Roll call, sir. Commissioner Weed.
Present.
Chair Weed. Mayor Boland. Councilmember Brost.
Here.
Councilmember Gagnani.
Here.
Councilmember Worthen.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As your introductory remarks identified, the Departments of Public Works and Planning, along with our Economic Development Manager, do not have any comments or presentations associated with this particular request tonight. We, like many in the audience, are here to listen to the developer present the proposal in a preliminary form, and also listen to your all's questions, the four of you that form the committee tonight. In advance of the meeting tonight, Mr. Newberry and I, along with the developer, Mr. Coleman, and his development team, put together a packet of information, and I'd just like to go over that briefly so you can understand what's been provided. Obviously, we've provided an agenda for tonight's meeting, and the principal items that are the subject of tonight's presentation and discussion are what I would consider the concept plan for the layout of the development on the approximately 5-acre site. Associated with that are some colorized renderings as well, and then some architectural elevations of the proposed building heights. I do want to draw your attention to a change. When the packet was prepared for you and delivered this past week, there was a set of architectural elevations included. This afternoon, Mr. Scott, one of the development team, sent over revised elevations that were forwarded to you by email, so you could have them in advance of tonight's meeting. But a set of those have also been printed for your use and placed at your chairs tonight. I believe Mr. Coleman will go over those in greater detail and explain why the change was made, or at least what they were thinking with the alteration. Along with the information from the developer, the department has provided you with some information from the town center plan. Principally, the items that have been provided are threefold. The regulating plan map, which is the land use component, the permitted uses associated with each of the land use categories that are identified on the regulating plan of the town center plan, and then finally, the design standards for the town center. These design standards, again, are linked or connected to the land use categories as identified on the regulating plan. So each parcel of ground in the town center has a land use designation, and as part of that land use designation, a list of potential or possible permitted uses, and then finally, corresponding to that land use designation, a set of design standards that the department, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and City Council will review against any proposal. Finally, with the assistance of the Economic Development Manager, we provided you an aerial photograph of the site and general vicinity. And somehow Mr. Jacqueline is able to overlay the plan onto it and get a nice perspective in terms of how it would look from an aerial perspective if it were developed as presented tonight in preliminary plan. With that, Mr. Chair, I want to thank you all for coming tonight, accommodating the 6 o'clock meeting, knowing that this is the first day the school's back in session and there's a lot more traffic out there than there's been in the last couple of weeks, so thank you. And I do want to extend from the Department of Planning to all the members of the committee and those in attendance a Happy New Year. Mr. Newberry and I are available for comments or questions, as well as Mr. Brown and Mr. Jacqueline. And I'm going to leave it up to Mr. Coleman to introduce his development team. Sure. Thank you.
Start. Thank you guys, first and foremost, for getting together and discussing. My name is Rob Coleman. I'm with ERC, one of the owners of the ERC with my father, Rod. Tonight with me, I've got my son, Preston, who's actually doing a school project, so this is his first city council meeting to observe, and he'll be reporting back on Friday, so I look forward to seeing what he's going to bring back. And then on the end here is Scott Bucky. He's the president of our construction team at our company. And George, I'll let you introduce you.
I'm George Stock with Stock & Associates Consulting Engineers, and joining me, associate with our firm, is Eric Fisher. Sure. I'll just give a brief overview on the site, and maybe I'll just walk up to the board and kind of walk through that. So this particular site is 4.13 acres. So 4.13 acres. The property itself is about 400 feet in a north-south direction, and this looks like a perfect square, but this is closer to 500 feet in an east-west. The property fronts Highway 109. We have the YMCA, which is to the north. We have Generations Drive. We have Turkey Track Road, which today is just a right out on the Highway 109. And then you have existing residential development, undeveloped property, undeveloped, or part of the college campus right here. The site has a little bit of topography. Basically, right through this section of the site is a ridge, which is about elevation 91, and then it falls down into a low area. Drainage is actually a culvert under Highway 109, falls down about 10 feet. And then it gradually falls from this point another 10 feet back into the northeast corner. Relative to the land plan and site planning, what we looked at was access to 109, and really quickly stepped back from that based on the existing access, which is located here at West Ridge, the YMCA, which is a right in, right out. And we looked at, potentially improving this. This is a 60-foot right-of-way along this portion, 30-foot right-of-way public street, making this a full access instead of a right out. And then having the circulation and the internal circulation for this proposed multifamily development really connect at Turkey Track and then come out and connect in Generations Drive that allows the access out to New College and via the signalized intersection in that location. The plan itself is comprised of 11 buildings totaling 111 units, so it is a residential multifamily proposal with amenities of pool and clubhouse located within and surface parking as shown on this drawing itself. This is a little bit larger plan. Again, same orientation, Turkey Track Drive, Crescent Street, which connects as Generation Drive, provides all the internal circulation, vehicular circulation, and then your 11 buildings. From a stormwater standpoint, we would be introducing in the areas draining to the northwest and then again down into the southeast, BMPs, bioretention, and then much of the stormwater would be put underground in an enclosed system before being released, but it would first be treated for water quality, volume reduction on the surface itself. Parking along the street, parking in parking lots adjacent to the buildings themselves. Again, the pool area, the common area, the clubhouse building would be located right in that area. And then go to the architecture, Rob. Sure.
Travis, did we get the other? That's okay.
Well, what do we got?
Well, this is just, are you going to hook up to the other one? Or is it in there?
No, it's the,
Okay.
it should be in the closer.
Let's go to the layout.
With the layout, as George said, we looked at several different options of how to potentially lay out multiple buildings. And one of the things that we didn't want to do, and especially being amongst neighbors, was have repetitive building types over and over and over again. I think multifamily tends to be really good at finding one thing, paint it the same color, put the same brick on it, and do it over and over and over again. And within this, I want to go over some of the architectural elements, but as you look at how these are turned, these buildings are turned, even though we replicate this building twice, it's not next to each other. And potentially you'll see a different facade of that building. So the goal is, as you walk through the community, to not feel like you're in something that's overly repetitive, because we feel like that really begins to be very bland and it doesn't really create much community. The other thing we wanted to do is focus on the centerpiece of the community here and here. The central lawn would be something similar to a back patio of one of your favorite restaurants. You'll have the sort of lights up above, the string lights up above, activities where people can come and gather, street trees that would line this entire street to keep everyone focused here. And then this building will be surrounding the entire pool, be fencing, and landscaping. And the idea is to tuck the pool back in, so again, when you walk in, it feels like its own separate experience. It doesn't feel like it's just left out in the middle of a field, which sometimes it can feel. So again, with that, in the access, I think George told you, it really dictated a tremendous amount of how these buildings would interact and how they would feel, because Highway 109 was just off the question. The other thing that's really interesting on this side is the drainage. There's a lot of underground drainage. We talked to Joe about above ground, and I think you were at the meeting, Julian, and we decided to tuck as much drainage underground as we possibly can, so you didn't get these large ponds. Let's see. We'll go to the architecture, and we didn't get this particular file set, so again, I'm going to show it to you, and again, you'll have this later. With the architecture, these are inspiration images, and these images use a mixture of a stone product and a siding product. And again, these are houses, so scale is going to be completely different. But a couple of things I want to show you and speak on is, you notice in a lot of these there's a contrast of color. So you'll have a dark color of siding, could be a dark gray, could be a white, and then the stone or other accents make a larger pop. And the idea is we accent the areas that really we want to highlight. We do not want this to feel stagnant. Again, you notice the darker area on the gables, you come back in with a softer tone in the middle. These are some of the pieces that we're trying to get to. And I know these 2D images sometimes struggle to get you there. So again, you'll have this, but I want to give you some ideas of where we're tracking. This style is primarily known as modern farmhouse. And it does blend a little bit with a few others, but if you look up, Pinterest is really one of the best websites, modern farmhouse. You'll be able to start to see what we're really going for within the design of the community. Again, this building here is this larger building. It has right at 20 units in it total. And you'll notice these are darker windows. You'll have a black or a bronze window, whereas on a building like this, you're going more over traditional 2/2 white, okay? So the buildings, again, look like they're sitting in the same family. However, there are going to be subtle differences within the building types, so they don't look repetitive. This building here, again, is probably going to be something around this building. This is going to be this building here. And so again, sticking with the vertical hardy board and changing colors. And again, this isn't doing it justice. This will be a much darker color. Again, the stone facade on the bottom with a brighter white, so our shutters begin to pop. And those are the architectural elements that really feel make a big difference. This building here goes by the pool, and the idea is to have restrooms and things, but also storage. But instead of just having a gate or a see-through fence, we wanted to highlight before you walk into the area. And any ancillary buildings, if we have to have them, would have to look something like this, so storage or other things like that. I think from here, George and I are anxious to understand maybe anything else that we can cover. And again, I apologize, our architect was meeting tonight, but his wife felt very ill, and so tonight I'm filling in as architect in development. I'll do my very best, but his name is Rob Sharp. He is based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He primarily works in new urbanist type communities, and if you'd like to look him up, he has a wonderful website, some great work, but he is on our development team, so we should be here tonight. So we'd love to answer any questions that you guys have regarding the development.
Councilman Grignani.
Yes, I have a number of questions and some comments for you. First of all, I assume that all of these apartments will be built to federal standards for handicapped housing, is that correct?
Absolutely. We have a consultant here in St. Louis that will...
You're going to have elevators inside the multi-story buildings?
There will not be any elevators.
How do you expect people with any kind of handicaps to reach the upper levels?
Well, all of the units that will be designated for handicap access or ADA access will be on the bottom floors.
What happens if, I assume you're not going to make these age-related, is that right? There's not an age restriction on who can purchase one of these apartments, is that correct?
There is not an age restriction, no, sir.
What about older residents who maybe aren't, quote, handicapped, but, you know, have to climb stairs to go to an apartment?
Right. Again, everything that you're speaking of for that particular person would be on the bottom floor.
So they'd have to be on the bottom floor, nothing else?
Yes.
Okay, that's one of my first questions. The second one is parking. I saw something on the diagram here, the one with the multiple buildings. It says lot 14, is that a parking lot? What's it right dead center? What is that?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the subdivision lot.
Okay,
The
so it's-
4.38
okay,
is-
that's a section that was not used at this time for a
Right,
building.
that is the.
Okay, so where is the parking? I noticed some parking spaces around the edge over here by the retention pond. Where else is it?
So I think everything that's blue, you have a drawing that's shaded blue, that's porous pavement, that's porous pavement. I'm sorry, I'll just go over this. So what's causing it to kind of blend is, see, any of the parking spaces, this would all be permeable pavement, so that's what we're differentiating.
Okay, these, because I asked
This is subterranean. this
subterranean
grid-
drainage.
Yeah, that's the underground drainage system. So really, the only thing above ground that you'll see would be the bioretention, which are more the shallow rain gardens, with basically the, get my bearings straight, is it the south side of City Hall. South side of City Hall, those are the bioretention rain gardens. But then all the quantity storage, the big runoff, we hold that underground. So that'll be subterranean. So this rectangle, and this rectangle, we won't see
What
those.
happens to the water that's collected in these? It's just allowed to soak into the ground?
It is. So the first level of treatment is the bioretention, which induces the infiltration. But then the system, this Triton system, this will either be a Triton system or a StormTech system. It's the arched pipes, and the bottom is a gravel bottom, a permeable layer to allow infiltration. And then it holds the water, and then the rate of discharge from there to the culvert, which would go under 109, is at the pre-developed release rate, and then what comes down over here and then goes basically.
Okay, so there will be discharge coming off of these going in two directions?
There will be.
One going this way, one going this way?
Yes, right, yeah, about a third of the site, just right here, a third of the site will go southeast, and 2/3 go to the northwest corner. And then the northwest corner goes north, and then it goes through the basin, which is on the college campus.
Have you run this by MSD?
Other than a phone call, we've not made any formal submissions to MSD, but I do have a letter in the file from MSD as to the requirements that we'll need to adhere to.
Well, just for something for you guys to understand, we're currently in the midst of looking at our stormwater erosion issues.
Mhm.
And when we put more load on these creeks, that presents a problem. MSD actually nailed us for several $1,000s for a small park that we built to control our runoff. So you may find that MSD is not going to be very cooperative with this. But then on the other hand, they need to have some assurance, as do we, that this runoff is going to be managed properly. So that's something that you need to
Yeah.
concentrate on very, very heavily.
Well, Rob and I have had a lot of conversations about this. There is a real premium in developing in this corridor because of the sensitivity of the creeks. And so our runoff, I mean, theoretically and engineered wise, and sometimes people find it hard to believe, that grass field today, the rate of runoff post-develop will be less than what comes off that grass field today because of how extensive these underground systems are.
But you're going to have more concrete, which will increase.
So what happens is the quantity increases, overall quantity, but the rate that it's discharged is dramatically reduced. For anything over the 1-inch storm, the 1 inch is actually infiltrated back into the ground, but those bigger storms. And the erosion ones are the ones that are I call them frog chokers. They're the inch or the 2 inch that come in 15 minutes that the frogs can't even get out of the way.
We've had a few of those.
We've had, in the last 5 years, we have more of those than we have the, 12-hour rainfall, a couple inches, it comes quick. And that's taken care of, that's what's called channel protection. So that's where we hold all that water and release it over 48 hours to eliminate those erosive discharges.
Okay, well, anyway, that's a heads up, but that's going to need to be looked at extensively
Sure.
before anything gets done with that. Okay, so parking, how many units total? You said it was 20 in each of the big buildings, that's 40?
111 is what we have.
111 total?
Yes.
Okay, and you're allowing how many parking spaces?
I don't know the number. I wish I knew the number. I can't believe I don't know the number, but I don't know it. We'll get
Figure
back.
two cars per per
Or
household?
one, it's usually not two.
It's about 1.5 per.
One and a half?
Yeah.
Some of these are single bedroom apartments,
60% of them will be single-bedroom apartments.
but if there's two people living there, they each may have a car, so.
Potentially, we're using a metric that we've used many times over. So again, we're relying on what we've historically done.
I think if you look at the ITE, you know, who've studied all these
Yeah.
it's about they're about 1.3 spaces per unit.
Have you done a traffic analysis on this area yet?
No, the only thing that we've done so far is had some conversations with MoDOT. As Rob indicated, you know, we've done a few iterations of this plan, and the first one had an access right out on the 109, and we knew. But we needed MoDOT to tell us no. You
Yeah,
know,
I could have told you that before
I
you
know,
talked to
I know.
But that brings up a point, because you've got a connection on this Crescent Avenue over to Turkey Track. Turkey Track's a very small road at this point in time. It's not
We would
much-
widen it, we would widen
Well,
it to
yeah,
2 lanes.
remember, there's a retirement community behind you, okay? And this road is very close to them, okay?
Mhm.
So you gotta consider that when you start talking about widening roads and making more noise, okay? The other thing is, assuming that Turkey Track only remains a right out, which is what it is now, because you're not gonna get a left out, you're not gonna get a left out of there. To get a left turn out of the Turkey Track will be almost impossible and dangerous unless something special is done, and MoDOT's not gonna be real pleased with you about doing that, so you need to consider that as well. Having said what I had to say about Turkey Track, the next problem you got is Crescent Avenue going out onto Generations Drive. Generations Drive now is a bit of a problem because of the junior college, because of the community college. And some of the residents who are sitting behind you will tell you that they've had their concerns about the traffic that exits from the community college onto Generations Drive. You're gonna substantially increase traffic on that road, and I don't know where that's gonna take us, but it's gonna create congestion of some sort. So that's something that needs to be looked at very heavily before you make any final decisions. But as far as 109 is concerned, your chances of getting an exit on the 109 beyond what you've got now is probably unlikely. Okay? I've been trying to get a left turn lane off of Highway 100. Lots of luck with that too, right? Okay, so I'm sorry to take up all your time, but I got more questions, and then I'll shut up. Okay, the road, the traffic, parking, handicap. Okay, and noise abatement. What are you gonna do about noise abatement from here? You said you're gonna have a community area where people can go to a pool and sort of a community recreational facility?
It's located more to the north part of the site, nestled in between the buildings, not to the south.
Okay, lots of things to think about.
Sure.
I'll shut up and let somebody else ask a question.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Rose?
Yeah, who would be what's your target market, and like what would the rents range in?
First question, target market, right now, that's the widest it's ever been in multifamily housing. It could be a college student all the way up to a senior, so it really right now is varying. The second question was, I'm sorry? Rents. So, right now, where we feel it probably will come to on one bedroom is somewhere between $950 and $1,200. On a two bedroom, we're being told by local representatives probably $1,300, $1,250 to $1,350 is about where they're indicating that the market is.
Councilman Worthy?
Thank you. Let's go back to parking real quick, if you don't mind, Mr. Stock. I know you said all the blue. Around the exterior, especially along 109, at least on what's been put in front of us tonight, it appears to be white. Is that supposed to all be porous parking?
That wouldn't be, and the reason is there's a water main underneath there, so we wouldn't be infiltrating storm water over the water main, so those were not porous.
Okay. So the same thing with the area immediately to the west of the bioretention? That would also not be porous?
That's correct.
Okay. For the units themselves, and this is as much an architectural as it is just a practical issue, with 110, 111 units, everybody's going to want, obviously, access to heating, air conditioning, and so forth. Where do you plan on placing those units, or will they be centralized to these buildings?
Most of them will be on top in a well where you cannot see them. They will be hidden on the roof.
I was thinking. Okay, so there's more, obviously, the peaked roofs that we see in the pictures.
There would be a well up at the
Well
very top of the
behind
peak,
there
and you would not
on those
see it.
All right. All right, that would help greatly, I think, in terms of the legal standpoint. Yeah, and I'll second everything Dr. Councilmember Greg Nye said regarding Turkey Track. Just, cut it off, just make your own circle drive, Crescent Street, have it connect to Turkey Track, bring Turkey Track back to Generations. It doesn't make sense to go ahead and make the connection out to Highway 109, at least in my opinion. Coming up and down that particular part of the road a number of times during the week. There's a hilltop, obviously, that comes immediately to the north, so the ability to make a left out of there is, I would say, almost impossible, just from a speed standpoint and sight lines. Making a right out, I would call dangerous, simply because of that hill that's there and the speeds. So it's just something to obviously keep in mind as you're going forward. The other thing, there was something else I had. Maybe I'll defer to somebody else while I come back to that. I'll save that for a little bit later. Go ahead.
Mayor Boland.
Joe, could you, I have a question for you to begin with. Could you summarize and confirm the zoning of the property relative to what's vis-a-vis what's being proposed tonight by this group?
Property is currently zoned NU non-urban resident district. It has been since the incorporation of the city of Wildwood. Purchase of it by St. Louis Community College, not changed the zoning. For this project to proceed forward, what we typically use with multiple family now is to see a planned commercial district. As a planned district, we're able to write a specific ordinance that is linked or connected to the site. Gives us the ability to address concerns that are identified as part of the public hearing process and thereafter. So my guess would be something of a commercial district.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then that means in terms of what I would call a clean shot with respect to being compliant as it sits here today with the zoning rules, it isn't. It would need a site-specific ordinance for this to go forward. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So I don't recall other developments, ERC, multifamily development that you've done in Wildwood. Is this your first one?
In Wildwood, yes.
Okay. So if we were to ever get to this point, I guess you would have references from other cities and municipalities with what you've done projects?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to make a motion here in just a second. Before I do that, have you engaged in any outreach to the residents of Meadows of Wildwood, the YMCA or St. Louis Community College relative to this development?
We were going to after this meeting.
Okay, I would encourage you to do that.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to make a motion. So the motion would be that the proposed applicant provide a traffic study and an analysis that's more specific as to the market of the group of people that you plan to put in the project, and this would be at your expense, and then come back and present that to this development review committee within, what do you think would be a reasonable time? 120 days, 3 months?
I would defer to Mr. Stock, but to do a traffic analysis, I would say a minimum of 45 to 60 days.
Right. Okay, so how much time do you think would be reasonable?
I think 60 days on the traffic study. I don't know about the market analysis, how long that would.
Why don't we make it 90 just to be safe? And my reasoning is, we're not traffic engineers. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion about Turkey Track and so on and so forth, but you're adding, I mean, I think we would all agree, you're adding, a number of cars into an area that's got some issues that potentially with respect to in and out on 109, the relationship to the community college, the relationship to Meadows of Wildwood, the relationship to YMCA. And I just think that that's a central issue that ought to have more data scientifically that shows what we're looking at before we would go to the next step. And if I didn't mention it, it would be not at the city's expense, it would be at the proponent's expense. So that's my motion.
After a second, could I have an opportunity to speak?
Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Second by Councilman Grignani. Mr. Village.
Knowing the preliminary nature of the committee's meeting, maybe to soften the blow to the developer, both Mr. Brown and I would ask for a traffic analysis before we would proceed to a public hearing on this particular site. So, it's one way or another, this particular site dictates the need for that traffic analysis.
So thank you for that point, Joe. So the only difference would be it would come back to this committee first, but you would need it in any event. So thanks for that.
Does you need it as an amendment to your motion?
I don't think so. I think that's just a fact.
Thank you.
Now,
Can you maybe give me some clarity on the market analysis? We typically do not get, we've done analysis on St. Louis and obviously the market in general and then specific submarkets, but it doesn't particularly say this type of person lives there. It would give you a somewhat reasonable guess as to what the demand would be as far as number of units, but it would not identify the type of person.
Well, I guess what I'm looking for is, given the location of it, given the pricing of it, given the amenities that you have, and probably 2 or 3 other things we could come up with, in conversations with Joe, something that has more specificity than, with all due respect to your answer earlier, which is, and fair enough, you don't know as you sit here tonight, and I just think that we need to know that before we move forward. So I guess those would be just a few of the criteria that I would suggest be part of that discussion.
Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, I know that ERC has done a number of multiple family projects across the Midwest. There may be a couple of locations that mirror or have similar characteristics as Wildwood. If they were to provide information about their tenant mix at those locations, would that be helpful?
But yeah, potentially depending on the similarities and so forth. But I listed those just FYI in priority. Traffic is for sure the bigger issue, but the market as to what you're actually doing here and who's going to end up in this place, given what we have going on very close to it. I think we just need to have some analysis of that preliminarily.
I just have a question for you, Mr. Vunich. To clarify the zoning issues, is this still not part of the town center cultural, educational? So this would require a change in the town center plan, regulating plan?
Actually, no. When the cultural institutional overlay district was added to the town center plan, we looked at the existing pattern of land use, which include the Wildwood Family YMCA and the community college. And we thought, what would be complementary to those 2 major institutional type uses? And one of the uses we talked about were multiple family residences. So on the list of potential or possible permitted uses are multiple family dwellings. So from the perspective of the department and at least the developer, it's more of an issue of, does this design work on the site? And secondly, and equally important, if the design is authorized on the site, does it create the least amount of impact as possible relative to the other land uses and the surrounding roadway system, including the environment?
And just one caveat, assuming the motion passes relative to the traffic part, that would include an analysis of noise created by that traffic.
See, we have a motion. I'll do a
Quick question,
Okay.
Mr. Vunich or Mr. Brown. With regard to traffic studies, typically are noise analysis part of those traffic studies?
I would say typically not.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well. If anything, I would think noise would be, that we're talking about here is what's being generated off Highway 109 and there's traffic going by, correct?
Depends on what type of noise the concerns
We're
relative.
talking truck traffic as we typically have along 109. It's, 109 is a famous cut through now between 44 and 64 to the north.
Well, a multiple family project will generate a certain amount of noise that isn't necessarily located there at this time. Just from the perspective of adding 111 units onto the property, you'll have the activity of the people that reside there, the starting of the cars, the turning off of their cars, the comings and goings, them on their patios or balconies, whatever the case may be. A good step in terms of noise abatement is the fact that they are placing the majority, if not all, of the HVAC up high on the 2 or 3 story buildings and putting it in a well which will direct the sound up instead of out and around. It won't radiate per se. In conversations with Mr. Stock and Mr. Coleman, we've also talked about light trespass. Just making sure that when cars are parked or cars are entering and leaving, that they're not shining into the back of that row of attached units that were the first constructed at the Meadows. And I know they've looked at that as well.
That begs the question, and Mr. Stock and Mr. Coleman, maybe you can answer, with regards to the parking area, especially to the south, are there any planned, let's say, awnings or parking carports or anything of that sort planned for those areas that it would help maybe create a wall then to prevent that spillage of light from headlights?
We certainly can add that if that's a concern.
We can address that. Mayor Bowles?
So that's the reason I mentioned inclusion of the noise part of it, because even though a traffic study may not typically, I think they have previously come to the city that way, but regardless, I just mentioned it to make sure that
So the motion's being modified then to add a noise study?
I said it was part of the motion already. But if you want to modify it, if there's no objection, that would be
Councilman
modified.
Grignani, you want to accept that as a second?
I don't have a problem with modifying the motion.
Okay. So we'll modify the motion with traffic study and then the noise study. Two different.
Can I ask a question? I'm just not
From a
familiar with the noise
theoretical-
study. There's an ordinance on noise, county ordinance. I'm not sure if Wildwood has one on maximum decibels at the property line. If we adhere to that,
Right.
that's what we have to adhere to.
It'd be an analysis, conceptual analysis study for
Conceptual.
noise.
All right, I'll investigate that.
Joe can give you.
Okay. Well, one other comment that we failed to mention, relative to parking, the question, Mr. Worthy, you just asked about carports. There are no carports, but buildings, there is below-grade parking in some of these buildings.
Okay.
So the buildings where you don't see the parking spaces perpendicular, there is pull-in parking in this building, the building to the north, and the building to the north. So those are enclosed garage parking.
That's good.
And we are not putting any balconies on these buildings. We found that although they're sometimes a great amenity, they can tend to collect things just at random. And it's usually better to just provide really nice outdoor spaces than it is to provide balconies. So we will not have any of those on the buildings.
Thank you.
Councilman Grignani.
A question about building number 10 along Generations Drive there. I assume that the back elevation is facing that road, is that correct? Of that building?
The west elevation,
The rear elevation.
the west side's facing Generations.
The back of the building or the entryway is facing Generations Drive? Which way is that building oriented? Is it oriented so that the front of the front elevation is facing the roadway, or is it facing interior?
So the parking is underneath the bottom floor. We'll be parking on the building.
Okay.
It is facing along Generations.
Right. So that would be the front elevation?
Yes.
Okay.
As a request, can you add the parking that's underneath the building as a dashed line on the
We will,
building?
and
Presentation purposes, I think that would be helpful.
And just one other thing before we vote on the motion. If there's no objection, I would ask that once you select whoever is going to do the study, that you run that by the Department of Planning. before you engage them.
We will.
Thank you.
If there are no other comments, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
Other comments or questions from the committee members?
One question that I have, if I can jump in, is the potential tree line from 109 to this development. How much space are you going to allow for highway right-of-way plus setback on the parking?
It's variable, but it's not, there's not a lot right now. There's
looks
also
like
the
that.
trail, right, yeah, so there's the trail that's running partially in the right-of-way and on the private property. One of the images had landscaping on it, Travis, that helped a little bit. I think we need to come back and address what those numbers are, numerical numbers, what the setback is, but I think at the closest point, there's 10 feet from the right-of-way line to the closest parking space. And then as it goes to the north, that might be 15 feet up to the north side. It's open in the southwest corner, but that northern portion is between 10 and 15 feet, stripped between the right-of-way and the parking.
And I might, if I were you, consider maybe a fence or something to screen headlights from parked cars shining onto the highway, because it's become a...
That or a hedge. I don't know what that would most aesthetically,
yeah.
but achieve, I know what you're saying, so don't distract the motorists on 109.
Right.
Blind.
Councilman Worthy.
Yeah, either Mr. Stock or Mr. Coleman. I know you have the pergola plan for the pool area and the court. In the central lawn area, I know to the west there's, I guess that's a brick pavement, no pergolas or anything like that, no overhangs in terms of providing shade areas or anywhere else around on the site? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so Building 9, the pavement that you see up in front of it is an extension of what will be the office as well as the fitness facility.
Okay.
So we'll be planning on spaces to extend fitness and other things out from there. And then, yes, there'll be some shade pieces that we will incorporate in the pool and in the central lawn. A landscape architect will be one of the next steps we have to design.
Okay. The last question I have, in this very southwest corner, just below Building 10, there's what appears to be a square area. I almost want to guess that that's a trash receptacle area? Or,
That is.
Yes.
Does the department have any comments?
No, sir, but thank you for asking. I would offer that Mr. Brown would like to offer any comments or ask any questions.
I have no questions this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, with the motion and no other comments or questions, I believe we've completed our task tonight.
Motion to adjourn.
Second by Councilman McNally. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Thank you all again for coming tonight and participating.
I've got something for you. Okay. Before you go. You heard of the group did this story? Oh, I got to give it to you. So that was yours. Okay. I just sent it to my kids. I ran over. There's other things we're going to do. Yeah, that was so close. That's fine.